Hi, I'm Theo, and these broadcasts are to support the blogs on NoMoreSea.com's website as well as the online classes. In this episode, a personal reflection on what is the Bible? So in this episode, I want to talk about what is the Bible? And I guess as I reflect on the content of this channel and its original mission to talk about my journey, so I'm trying to be a little bit retrospective here, not sure which areas I'm targeting to answer this question, but be more maybe practical minded, which often I get accused of not being so much sometimes. But just to think over this question, what is the Bible? I mean, you hold up a Bible and say, well, what is this? And trying to grasp that just in the outset. It's a challenging question for a lot of reasons. But as I think about it, I guess the way I choose to think about it at the moment is more so in this introspection I'm doing. I guess my life has been more of a case of following the ancient ways of defining things or describing things. And there are things that are so profound, things that are just absolutely just incredible. And without, some sort of, when I think about these complex things to describe in a post-enlightened world, where we've gotten away from the supernatural and we've gotten away from a lot of the mythos behind our thinking, but maybe in the postmodern world, we're starting to return to our roots, in a sense. So to try to answer this question, and you can see how I'm struggling because I want you to understand the struggle that's going on inside of me, even as I try to do this. So in the ancient world, to describe these things was easier, I guess, because they had language, they had concepts, they had worldviews that allowed for such that today I don't think necessarily apply to most people's thinking, and unless you're in higher mathematics or a child. And so for me, that journey is becoming, I guess, more and more a child of God. And so this is going to be a rambling session, so it's probably going to be long, but to think about what is the Bible then, as I parse that and, put my thoughts together, the ancient world would also describe things by saying what it's not. And that's often a way that you would define something. Well, it's, what is this? Well, let's start off with what it's not. It's not this, it's not that. And then I grab onto that foothold as I climb this, make this ascent to try to understand what is the Bible. And I'm thinking that, I spent most of my life on that question by what it's not. I've followed many rabbit trails and found them that I had to turn back because they ended up being empty. And so I think a lot of people's faith journey or spiritual journey, or however you want to call it, seeking the truth, or however, where they travel the world, and I've certainly done my fair share of that, maybe not as much as others, to the extent they have, but to find, this doesn't work and that's not the answer. And many people have testimonies in their life, where, I went and tried this and tried that, and, this didn't work and that didn't work and this didn't work. And the current expression of wherever they are, this is, they'll either be able to have a more positive outlook and say, well, I found this and this is, really something. And I think the whole world's doing that. find that the world is in this pandemic situation also struggling to find, the answers. And, finding out some of our theology, and I've recently, posted on this, and I think some people on the blog, I think some people have, in a sense, thrown out the baby with the bathwater when they've had to throw out bad theology and end up throwing out what they think, in a sense, is theology altogether. And I don't think they've actually, gotten enough theology to understand, enough to make the proper decision. And it's easier to cast something aside rather than, really trying to work with it. So on the channel, I've been making lots of videos on how to get free Logos, and Logos is such a complex thing itself, let alone the Bible, but just a Bible software. It's so complex in all the things it's trying to accomplish and do, because people have come at the Bible at so many different angles. There's so many versions of theology to try to understand what this thing is. And we try this, and then we find, well, it's not that. And we try this, and it's not that. And, we're on a certain path, and we think this is it. And later on, we find out, well, it's not this. And, maybe that's why we have the denominations. Different people go down the path for a while, and then, this is it. And then they just choose another denomination or start a new denomination. Or now, I guess there's no such thing as denominations, but whatever we're starting. And, you just start a new church, or you do something else. And because, whatever I thought it was at that point in my life, now it's not that, so we end up defining things by what they're not in our search, whether we were, after the things of this world and drugs or alcohol or whatever, or tried other religions, or we tried, various parts of Christianity, whatever your journey is, you can kind of see what I'm coming from. So I think I've spent a lot of time on what the Bible's not. And I've been a part of this conversation along with many people, obviously, in trying to do this. And, so I've played my fair share of espousing things and later coming to understand that they're not that. Does the Bible talk about, for instance, dinosaurs, and I often talk to my students about that. And now, the Bible doesn't say anything about dinosaurs. So it's not about dinosaurs. That's not the topic at which it wishes to describe. For the people that I talk to, how do you translate the word dinosaur into your language? And most of the time, they don't have a word for dinosaur in their language necessarily, as we have I'm talking about the word dinosaur, what was discovered a couple centuries ago. So that kind of thing. So not the dragons or, mythological or, those things. Those things obviously would have counterparts in their language and literature from thousands and thousands of years. They have these concepts, but I don't think they're related to dinosaur. And so I don't think the Bible actually is about dinosaurs. I don't think it speaks to that. I don't think it's addressing that at all. And there are some people who concord the Bible with, science and find those things. And I just don't see it, because I just don't think the Bible was discussing that. I don't think that was a subject matter. I don't think it was on the mind of the people that it was written to. So I don't think that works. I've been told that there's helicopters in the Bible. I don't believe that. I don't think John saw helicopters. I've been told that there's submarines in the Bible. I was, told recently that in the year 2020, there was this locust a plague that was afflicting this part of the world that I'm in, from down in Africa all the way up into Asia. And there was talk about that, and someone was reading Revelation 9, and they were, discussing it, and it got quite lively. And after a translation, and I found out what was going on later, someone came to me, and knowing that I have, this journey of mine and the Bible and PhD studies and whatnot, and came up to me and they said, well, obviously Revelation 9 is about the locust plagues, in 2020. And I don't understand why that other person is so wrong. And why can't they see that I'm right? And I disagreed with them. I don't think Revelation 9 is about a locust plague in the year 2020, obviously, because 2020 is over with, and I don't think that's what Revelation 9 is about. And so, I don't think the Bible's about these things, and I think we as readers, and as I grew up with the Bible and reading it and then trying to understand what it is, and then figuring out that, well, it's an ancient document written to an ancient people. So it's not written to me in my language. So if I read it as if it's written to me personally, like it's God's personal letter to me, and I'm dealing with, ancient languages that has gone through numerous translations, and just look at all the Bible translations today. There's so many of them in the English language. It's unreal. And that's valuable to me in a sense. I really like that. Having so many different translations from which to choose to try, and then trying to use something like Logos Bible Software to get behind those translations, to get back to that original language as much as possible, and trying to understand, and it's become such a, since what, the last how many decades now? It's just amazing how many decades have passed. And, so many people can say, well, in the Greek, or in the Hebrew, and so, so many people have touted that. And Logos is a wonderful way to get into all that, but it also can be dangerous. It can be dangerous as well. So, if we get in and we're, not careful, we can easily make mistakes. If, private interpretation of the scripture becomes supreme, superimposed above, beyond, any other witness, where what I think what God is saying in his Bible must be true, and every other form of evidence is not true. So I guess I'm really concerned about that. So I think defining what is the Bible in part comes from, well, what it's not, So it doesn't make sense to me that now, as I've gone down those roads, I don't know that I bought into how much I bought into some of these ideas. I'm not sure. I don't think that, for me, it doesn't seem like that in retrospect, and hindsight's 2020, but looking back, I don't think I bought into these ideas as much as maybe as some people do, or, I don't know. They just don't have any kind of hold on me whatsoever now, that there's submarines or helicopters. Did I really ever sincerely think that's what was in the Bible? I mean, I was told that by a great number of people, but did I believe them? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much weight or emphasis I put in those parts of their understanding of the scriptures. I do believe I put emphasis in other areas where they, interpreted and come to find out they're wrong. And then that means I'm wrong, and that's okay. It's a growing process. And so I think when it comes down to what we begin to explore, what is the Bible? You can begin to take things off the table, per se. It's, over here where I'm at in Asia, a lot of food is prepared, so I don't know if they still do that in certain parts of the world, but over here anyway, if you're in the village, you go out and you dig it up out of the ground or whatever, and you bring it to your house or your property, whatever, and you begin to go through the process of, if it's a vegetable, you go through the process of then beginning to clean it and, peel away the parts that you don't eat, and cutting and clipping until you get it in the manner in which you want to cook it. And so there's a lot that's involved. Taking this vegetable from a tree or ground or whatever, and then removing every part that's not wanted. And I love animals in a sense. If you're going to eat meat, it's pretty challenging because and where I come from, and basically what I grew up on was that the meat is meat for me. When I define the word meat, that's just the muscle. That's just that part, the animal that not the fat, not the skin, not the kidneys, not the liver, not the intestines, not all these different parts of the animal, just the meat. Some people say flesh, but it's really not flesh because it's not the skin. Uh, it's the meat. So I have a difficult time defining that, and so if you're going to eat meat, there in other parts of the world, there's parts of the animals that they eat, and that are delicacies in a sense that you don't waste any part of the animal per se. And there's, I've been in certain places where, let's say a chicken, for instance, they make soup out of the feet of a chicken, and you drink chicken feet soup, so you don't even waste the feet of the chicken. So, I mean, that's some of the interesting things that I have had, and so, I'm amazed at this. So, it's just incredible, and when you come to the Bible, you have to start figuring out what it's not, and you have to start cutting and clipping away a lot of things that the Bible is not. And I've spent my life doing that, and in doing a PhD, I've gotten where there's a lot of things that I've cut out, but there's a lot of things that formerly I cut out that I've added back in because I found out that they are truly important. And they are required. And when I was a kid, there's certain things I would eat that I don't eat today, and there's certain things that as a child I would never eat, and my parents are always laughing at me because my wife makes them and I eat them now, and it's amazing. There are things that my parents actually I find humorous. I tell them what I've had, and they're like, I mean, they don't even eat it. It's interesting. So it's the same way, I guess, with the Bible and my journey. And so in my journey, we're talking about, this fact that the Bible is not this, and it's not that, it's not this, and we keep discovering that, and we keep on peeling away things, and then someone comes along and tells us, no, you want to keep this part in because this is why it's valuable and it's needed for you. I had just a discussion, I believe yesterday, with someone and about some of the things I eat now that I never consumed before in my life, and they said, well, I can't consume that. It just doesn't taste very good. And I'm like, you're right. There's a lot of things I'm eating right now that do not taste good, but I'm informed, as far as I know, by doctors that these things are important for my health. And so, that's why I'm eating them. I'm not eating them because they taste a certain way. I'm eating them because my understanding is they are good for my body, and I want to respect what God has given me and try to make this body able to last as long as it possibly can until it's my time to be finished, so that I can do as much as God would have me to do, and I'm less of a burden on my loved ones than I have to be, and I can do what God has called me to do for as long as that's possible, and be most effective. So there's a lot of things that I would never have done when I was a child, and I've changed, those things keep changing as science comes along and discovers things. It goes back and forth whether you should or should not consume certain things, whether these things are good or are bad, and it's amazing how much the Bible is painted in that picture. There's certain extremes. We put everything in the black and the white, the good and the bad. This is right and that's wrong, and we find out that it's not necessarily that dichotomy is too much. And again, I posted on this recently, and I referred to some things that are out there, like Dr. Heiser, who is battling pancreatic cancer and waiting for the opportunity to do the next stage that's going to getting closer to victory over it. And he took time out to post something I thought was wonderful on his website that kind of addresses some of these things. And so, as you mature, you're gonna revisit things, and you have to go back and say, well, maybe this idea that I once thought was wrong is right, and maybe this idea that I once thought was so right is wrong, and you keep revisiting those things. You don't completely do away with them all the time. There are some things that seem that are probably best that can be done. They're obviously wrong, but there are many things that that may not be as they are. So I know that there's some people out there very much opposed to like the Roman Catholic tradition. And growing up, my thoughts about the Roman Catholic tradition then and my thoughts now, I don't believe that they're as bad as some people paint them out to be. I just think they're misunderstood. And I had a recent conversation with someone about that. And the same thing, though, about other religions. In this world that we live in today, if people are being religious, sometimes we paint them as being satanic, and they're going to, however you deem this, they're going to burn in hell for eternity or whatever if we don't, and that old dynamic of that. And I was trying to say, well, in my thoughts, as I go through another festival season here in Asia, and they're worshiping all these gods and they're doing all these things, I'm wondering though that if it's just people are trying to interact with the supernatural, and maybe they're making mistakes like I've made mistakes in my journey. Maybe they're going down paths that are wrong. But maybe the paths, in a sense, maybe the paths that they're going down might be wrong. But maybe in certain aspects they are, ultimately though, they are communing with some form of truth. And eventually they can get on what would be the right path. And I think for me anyway, as a Christian, I've done a lot of bad things and wrong things in my life and made a lot of wrong choices, and I continue to do that. But I continue to want to be corrected and changed and molded by God. And so I think rather than just labeling everyone as bad, maybe I should look at it more positively and say, well, at least they're seeking some truth in a world that's the post-enlightenment world. And that's an opportunity for a dialogue to find out why they're where they are, what brought them there, and see where they might be headed. And then be able to have a dialogue where I can share where I have been, what has brought me to where I am, and where I think I'm going. And maybe in that dialogue that both of us can get a better picture of what it means to be human. I'm really confused on even the word human, because we often say, well, I'm just human when we're making mistakes. And I don't think anymore that that's the correct way to look at it. Yeah, we're mortal. And yeah, we are fallen creatures, but I don't think that's what it means to be human. I think when I think of humanity, what it's supposed to be, I think of Jesus. I think when Jesus came, he's fully God, but he's fully man. And I think this idea that, God is trying to express something. I think what it means to be human is defined by Jesus. I think, in the beginning, we'll go back to the beginning, when we open the first page of the Bible, the first subject is God. And I really get back to what is the Bible. I think the Bible is God's revelation of who he is, and he's the subject of the entire book from front to back. And when it comes to the first human, Adam, he makes his mistakes and he ceases to be what God wanted him to be. And so I think when Jesus comes, he gets us back on track. This is what it truly means to be God, but what it truly means to be human. And so, as the early church fathers stated it very well, numerous times, from the beginning of their, ministry and their witness to us, at the earliest, almost early, some of the earliest fathers, we have this idea that Jesus became like us, so that we can become like him. And so, if God is the subject and the target, that's where we're all wanting to get to. And so, humans are made as the image of God. We are to reflect, we are to image, we are to be like God. And since God is the subject and the Bible is a revelation of who God is, but its primary focus, at least at the outset, and this seems to me to point to what it ultimately is the story of humanity. That is, God taking the earth and breathing his life into it and making man, making Adam from the Adama by breathing his spirit into Adama. And Adama becomes Adam. And from the ground, from the earth, we have earthlings. And so this focus on earth and earthlings, throughout the Bible. But those two are to come together. It's almost like you have, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And we're kind of a mixture of those two things. Just like Jesus is fully human, but he's fully God. We are a mixture of those two things, in a sense. We are earth. We are mortal, we are flesh, we are physical material stuff. But then that heavenly, that spiritual, that something else thing has come inside of us and has been breathed into us that makes us something else. And it's beyond what an animal is necessary, that the animals have been animated in a sense, but it's beyond that. It's far beyond what, that. It's much more, as the Bible is very, its message. What is it? Well, it is the revelation of God, of who he is, and who we can be when we become more like him. And if we were more like God, we would not, if we loved God, and if we loved our neighbors, those are the two greatest commandments than what we could achieve. And so it's fascinating to me. So I think what the Bible is at the outset is, it is the revelation that God has chosen to give to his people through his people. He chooses to use humans to be that message. And humans then have shared this down through the ages. Humans have shared this. Humans have collected these stories and put it all together, just like we're making a meal and we taste and see that, wow, this food is good. We taste and see that God is good, and we become more like him as we understand the revelation of who he is and who he longs to be when someone does fully embody that revelation. And I think that's what Christ is a picture of a human that fully embodied the revelation of who God is. So if you want to know the greatest expression, the reality of God, you get that from Jesus. And I think that's why we call ourselves Christians, because we are like Christ. And when we become more like him and more like God, and we live that godly life, and we love God and love neighbors, love each other, then I think that is the expression of God's love as best represented. And so I don't know if this rambling is going to help, but I thought it would be a good place to at least start. And I'll have to figure out how I'm going to share this. So I hope you enjoyed this today, and we'll see how we can do more of these maybe in the future. But this is something I wanted to get off my chest, at least at the time being. Thank you very much, and God bless you for listening. Stay tuned for more episodes in videos to help you with your journey from nomorec.com.